Indonesia's economy shows promising signs of steady growth, with a notable decrease in internal instability compared to previous years. Encouragingly, many leaders are prioritizing national development over personal gain. While some exceptions still exist, the overall trend is positive. And looking ahead, 2025 is projected to present greater challenges than 2024. In just a month, the world will begin to feel the initial effects of intense global winds. I hope these forces propel us forward rather than setting us back. Today's podcast focuses on the Indonesian economy, tailored specifically for staff at Indonesia's Ministry of Finance, Indonesia. Stay tuned and stay safe.
Welcome to everyone at the Ministry of Finance. We've got a deep dive here for you all today. We know you're all super busy, so we've gone through and looked at tons of recent economic data and analysis just to pull out the most important stuff.
Yeah, and we're really going to be zeroing in on the Indonesian economy, Got the latest reports from Bank Indonesia, those Kaede 2024 reports. You know the ones. Really gives us the big picture. And also we got the TKM December 2024 one too, with all those budget details.
All right.
Plus got some news on trade deals, investments, and even some stuff going on in the political world that you all, the ministry, should probably know about.
Okay, well, let's kick things off with that big picture economic overview then. The PK 2024 report, it seems to be a bit of a mixed bag, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'd say so. Kind of a glass half full, half empty kind of thing. On the one hand, we see GDP growth at, 4.95% in Q3 2024.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, definitely a positive. But, projections show it slowing down a bit, down to 3.1% in 2025.
So, sounds like we should be enjoying the good times in Ebony, huh?
Yeah.
But we probably need to get ready for some tougher times ahead. What's causing this slowdown, do we know?
Well, it looks like it's a mix of some global stuff and some domestic stuff. You got the global economic slowdown happening, interest rates are still stubbornly high everywhere too. And then there's, just this general geopolitical tension that's making everyone a bit nervous.
Right. Makes sense.
And don't forget, here at home, Indonesia's inflation rate hit 4.81% year on year back in November. So that's something we gotta keep our eyes on for sure.
For sure, yeah. And of course, this directly affects everyone listening at the ministry. A slower economy, that means potentially lower tax revenue, right? And then that could mean, adjustments to that 2025 budget.
You got it. And speaking of the budget, that TKM December 2024 report shows that government spending has been, it's been pretty strong, actually. It exceeded what was initially allocated in the budget in a few areas. Looks like the government's really trying to give the economy a boost and fund those really important projects.
Okay, so I see they're being proactive. But is all this spending sustainable, though? I mean, are we bringing in enough revenue to cover all of it?
Well, the good news is the report also shows government revenue has been strong, too. It's actually been exceeding targets in a bunch of areas.
Oh, okay.
Tax revenue, for instance.
So more money coming in.
Exactly. It's definitely encouraging, It seems like money's flowing into the government pretty well, which would hopefully mean less need to rely on borrowing.
Sounds like a bit of a balancing act then.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Like walking a tightrope, keeping the spending under control, but also making sure there's enough revenue to support that economic growth and all those big plans and stuff. Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's where you all at the ministry come in, right? You guys are the experts at making those tough decisions about where to spend the money and how to balance it all out. Now let's change gears a bit and talk about trade and investment. And Indonesia's making some pretty big moves on the world stage, I'd say.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to see Indonesia going after these new trade deals and pulling in all that foreign investment, and this new deal with Egypt, it's all about palm oil processing. That really, really caught my eye.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really smart move strategically. Not only does it open up a huge market for Indonesian palm oil, but they're also planning a big logistics hub over in the Suez Canal. I mean, that puts Indonesia in a really powerful position globally. It could be a game changer for the whole palm oil industry, but also for the whole economy, really.
For sure. And then you've got Apple, that big tech company making a big splash with their, $1 billion investment to build that AirTag factory over Batam.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think that really shows how attractive Indonesia is becoming for these tech companies looking to set up shop looking for somewhere to manufacture their stuff. Batam's free trade zone status is a big draw, plus it's right next door to Singapore, and there's a really skilled workforce there. It's a smart move for companies like Apple who want to, really expand in the region.
Makes sense. It's definitely something we can all be proud of in Indonesia. But, we also got to be realistic. There are always going to be challenges when it comes to balancing what's good for Indonesia with attracting that foreign investment, right? I mean, look at that whole iPhone 16 thing. All that controversy around those local content requirements. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah. I know what you mean. That whole temporary ban on iPhone 16 sales, that really brought to light that tension between, you know, trying to boost manufacturing here in Indonesia, but also making sure we have a competitive market. And look, I get it. Those local content rules, they're meant to help our industries grow. But sometimes they can backfire. They can make things more expensive here, and then our products aren't as competitive on the global market.
Yeah, yeah. The American Chamber of Commerce even came out and said, relying too much on these local content rules could actually make Indonesian products less competitive globally.
Sure.
It's tricky, right? Trying to find the sweet spot, the right mix of policies that will bring that investment in, but also make sure that our manufacturing sector is really competitive and dynamic, able to adapt.
Sure. Exactly. It's a tough one, but that's the challenge the ministry is facing, right? Figuring out those policies that encourage investment, but also make sure it's a fair playing field where everyone benefits, domestic companies and foreign companies. It's all about finding that win-win situation.
That makes sense. And speaking of challenges, there's a certain industry that's really, really having a tough time right now.
Yeah, the textile industry. They're raising a red flag. Some reports say there could be like 60 textile companies close to going bankrupt. That's a lot of jobs at stake. It could really ripple through the whole economy.
Yeah, it's a real wake-up call, isn't it? Makes you remember that behind all those economic numbers and indicators and stuff, there are real people and real businesses. This potential textile crisis, it could directly affect tax revenue, and we might need to spend more on social welfare programs too, right?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of fingers are pointing at that Permendag No 8/2024, that regulation that loosened up the import restrictions. It might have helped importers at first, but it seems like it ended up flooding the market with imported goods, and that, of course, hurt our local textile producers.
Right, right. And we're seeing it play out right now in real time.
Yeah.
You got publicly listed companies like PT, Asia Pacific Fibers, Pioli Way. They're having to stop production. They're laying people off. It's a tough spot, and it needs a quick response from policymakers, for sure.
For sure. It needs a multi-pronged approach, I think. We need to help those struggling companies right now, maybe with some financial support, but we also got to take another look at those import regulations, find that balance between protecting our domestic industries and making sure the market is competitive. And you all at the ministry, you're the experts in this area, figuring out how to make those policies work.
Okay, let's switch gears again. Let's talk about energy, another sector facing some tough challenges.
Yeah, Indonesia's oil and gas production, it's been going down, and that's concerning, not just for our energy security here, but also for our export revenue. Getting the sector back on track, that's super important for the long-term health of Indonesia's economy.
Makes sense. I was reading an article in The Diplomat the other day, and they had some interesting ideas about how to bring that much-needed foreign investment back into oil and gas exploration. They were talking about simplifying regulations, making it easier for exploration companies to get the data they need, that kind of thing.
Yeah, they make some good points. They also talked about changing the cost recovery system, maybe offering better terms so that exploration is more attractive, more profitable. The key is to make it easier and more worthwhile for companies to, come to Indonesia and explore for oil and gas. That's how we're going to turn that production decline around.
Yeah, makes sense. And they had another interesting idea, implementing what they call DMO holidays, basically giving companies a temporary break from those domestic market obligation rules so they can focus on exporting. It could be a good way to boost revenue in the short term and encourage more investment,
Yeah, that's a possibility. And of course, we can't forget about taxes. We might need to change up the tax rules around exploration activities. And that's where the Ministry of Finance really comes in, right? Making sure the tax policies are aligned with this goal of boosting domestic oil and gas production. That's crucial.
So it's a bit of a puzzle, right? Trying to
Yeah.
find the right mix of incentives and regulations and tax policies, all that stuff.
Exactly.
But with production declining and all these concerns about energy security, it's clear we need to find some solutions, and fast.
Absolutely. So welcome back to our deep dive into the Indonesian economy. Let's dig a little deeper now into some of those key economic indicators. You know, the ones that really give us that granular view of what's going on right now.
You mentioned inflation earlier, and that's definitely on everyone's mind these days. Bank Indonesia's report on monetary developments for November 2024, it has some pretty good insights on that, right?
Yeah, it does. It highlights a pretty significant development, actually. There's been a pretty big increase in the money supply,
Okay.
particularly in that category of narrow money. You know what I'm talking about, what they call M1.
M1, yeah.
Okay.
So how does this surge in M1, how does that connect to inflation?
Okay, so M1, that's basically all the most liquid forms of money in the economy, you know, mainly currency that's circulating around, and the money in checking accounts.
Oh, great.
When you see M1 going up, usually means people have more money to spend,
Yeah, I see.
which can be a good thing, you know, it can boost the economy. But if it grows faster than the supply of goods and services, well, then you got a problem. That's when you start to see inflation kicking in.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it's kind of a double-edged sword then.
You got it.
More money circulating, yeah, it can boost the economy, get things moving, but if it gets out of hand, then prices go up, and that hurts everyone.
Exactly. And that's where the Ministry of Finance, you know, they've got that really important role to play. They can use those fiscal policies to try and keep things balanced, you know, influence how active the economy is and keep those inflationary pressures under control. Like they can adjust government spending or mess with taxes a bit, you know, to try to soften the blow from a big increase in the money supply.
Okay, I see. So another balancing act then. Managing that growth, but also keeping an eye on inflation.
Yep, that's the game.
Well, let's move on to the government's budget then. We touched on that briefly before. It's obviously a critical piece of the whole economic puzzle here in Indonesia.
For sure. And Bank Indonesia's TKM December 2024 report, that goes into a lot more detail. One thing that jumps out is how much the government has been spending lately. I mean, it's been really robust. They're exceeding those initial budget allocations in quite a few areas. Looks like they're really going all in on stimulating the economy and funding those big key projects.
Yeah, and with that slowdown we talked about potentially on the horizon, you know, it makes sense to try and stimulate things now while we're still in a good spot, right? But I keep coming back to this question of revenue. Is the government bringing in enough money to cover all this spending? You know, is it sustainable?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And the good news is, well, the report shows that government revenue has been pretty strong too.
Okay. Yeah.
Actually exceeding targets in a lot of categories, including, you know, PAX revenue, which is huge.
So more money coming in. That's encouraging.
It is. It means the government can, you know, pay for all the important stuff, all those expenditures, and maybe even rely less on borrowing, which is always a good thing.
So it seems like we're in a pretty good position right now. Spending's up to support the economy, but revenue is keeping pace.
So far, so good. But, you know, the Ministry of Finance, they can't get complacent. They gotta keep a close eye on both sides of the equation, the revenue and the spending, and how they relate to each other.
Right.
Keeping that balance, that's what's going to make sure we're fiscally sustainable. If something happens to revenue, like commodity prices drop or, you know, the economy slows down, well, things could change pretty quickly.
Yeah, you're right. Can't take anything for granted. And with all those global economic headwinds we talked about, it's even more important to be cautious and keep a close eye on everything. Now let's talk about something that's, well, it's always a hot topic. Energy subsidies.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
This CSIS research report on energy subsidy reform, this really dives into it, you know, all the complexities and everything. Energy subsidies, they've been around in Indonesia forever, right?
Right.
The idea is to keep energy affordable, which is a good thing.
Right.
But they come with a cost, a pretty big one, actually.
Yeah, they do. That report really lays it out. You know, it talks about how big of a financial burden those subsidies are, especially as we use more and more energy. And it also points out that they can really mess with the market, make it harder to attract investments in those cleaner energy sources, the ones we really need for the future.
Okay, so not all good then.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough picture. I mean, the report says if we don't change anything, if we keep doing what we're doing, those energy subsidies could balloon to like 689 trillion rupiah by 2029. I mean, that's a huge chunk of the government's budget, money that could be going to other stuff, you know, important stuff like education or healthcare, infrastructure.
Wow, 689 trillion. That's hard to even imagine. So the report, it looks at a few different ways to reform these subsidies, right? Each with their own pros and cons, I guess. What are some of the main approaches they're suggesting?
Well, one way is to slowly increase the price of energy, the official price that's set by the government, like those administered prices. And at the same time, you adjust the subsidies so they're not such a big burden.
Oh,
That way you gradually reduce how much the government's spending, but you also try to protect people, especially those who don't earn a lot of money from those price hikes.
so it's a kind of phased approach then.
Yeah, kind of easing into it, letting market forces, start to play a bigger role in setting the price of energy.
Yeah, I see. What else are they proposing?
Another idea is what they call a dynamic pricing model.
Yeah.
So you fix the amount of subsidy you give per unit of energy, but then you let the price float, change every month based on what's happening in the international market. That way it's more, driven by the market. And it could help reduce those price distortions we talked about. But of course, it could also make prices more volatile, go up and down more. That could be tricky for people to manage, families and businesses.
Yeah, it's tough. Every option has its pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
It's all about finding that balance between, making sure the government can afford it, making sure people can still afford energy, and also thinking about the long term, transitioning to that more sustainable energy future we keep talking about.
That's the goal. And the Ministry of Finance, they're the ones who have to, look at all these different scenarios, try to figure out what they mean for the government's budget, what they mean for inflation, and most importantly, what they mean for, for people here in Indonesia. They got to find a solution that makes sense economically, but is also fair to everyone and, doesn't mess up the environment. It's a tough job.
Yeah. It's complicated for sure. Well, let's circle back to politics for a minute. We can't talk about the economy without talking about politics. What's happening in the political world always has an impact on those decisions being made at the ministry.
Oh, for sure.
All this news about PDIP's Secretary General, all those bribery allegations, that's definitely stirred things up. Just shows you how intertwined politics and economics really are.
Yeah. Big time.
And with all those accusations flying around about, political motivations behind the investigation, well, it just adds another layer of complexity to it all.
Yeah, it's a messy situation. But it really highlights the need for transparency, and accountability, too.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to money, to finances. When stuff like this happens, it can make investors nervous, and it can definitely influence policy decisions.
Makes sense. It's a good reminder that economic decisions, they're never made in a vacuum. It's always about the political landscape, what people are thinking and feeling, what's happening around the world. All of that plays a part in the choices the ministry has to make.
Exactly. And speaking of politics influencing the economy, let's talk about that VAT increase the government's been proposing. That's been causing quite a stir, even within the ruling coalition, I hear.
Oh, yeah, I've been following that. This
Yeah.
proposed increase going from 10% to 12%, it's got PDIP pretty riled up, one of the main parties in the coalition. They're worried about how it'll impact people, especially those with lower incomes.
Yeah, they're saying it's, maybe not the best time for this, with the economy potentially slowing down and all that uncertainty in the global picture.
Yeah, tough spot for the ministry, right? I mean, raising the VAT, that could bring in a lot of money, the kind of revenue they need to fund programs and reduce that budget deficit. But it could also make people spend less, and that could actually make the slowdown worse.
It's a classic dilemma, isn't it? Balancing those fiscal responsibilities with, thinking about fairness, about social equity. This is where the ministry, their expertise really comes in. They have to make those tough calls, find solutions that make sense financially, but also don't leave people behind.
Yeah, maybe they could look at some targeted measures, like exemptions for certain goods, things that everyone needs, so those price increases don't hit the poorest people so hard.
That's definitely worth considering. It's all about being creative, finding those solutions that hit multiple targets at once. Now, before we wrap up this part of our discussion, let's shift gears one more time and talk about something that's really the heart and soul of the Indonesian economy, Those micro and small enterprises, the SMEs.
Yeah, the backbone of the economy, right?
Yeah.
I was looking at some data from Indonesian investments, and it's amazing. There's something like 4.5 million of these micro and small businesses operating all across the country.
Yeah, and they're so important. They really drive the economy, create jobs, come up with new ideas. They're the engine, really, and we need them to succeed if we want Indonesia to prosper.
Absolutely.
Right.
But they face some unique challenges too, don't they? Especially now
Right.
with the economy changing so fast.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them have trouble getting access to capital, loans and financing. And the regulations can be really complicated, hard to navigate. And then, when the economy takes a downturn, they're often the ones who feel it the most.
Yeah, for sure. That's why it's so important for the Ministry of Finance to have policies that really support these SMEs, help them thrive.
Hmm.
Things like making it easier for them to get financing, giving them training and development opportunities, and simplifying those regulations. That can make a big difference.
Absolutely.
Supporting these businesses, that's got to be a top priority for the Ministry of Finance.
Yeah.
I mean, their success is Indonesia's success.
Couldn't agree more.
Wow. So much to think about. We've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? Global trends, specific challenges facing different industries here in Indonesia. It seems like the Indonesian economy is, well, at kind of a crossroads right now.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. There are definitely signs that the economy is strong, resilient.
Right.
But there are also some areas where things are a little more fragile, and that's where good policymaking really comes in.
Right, right. And we can't forget about the political side of things either, like that whole VAT increase debate. It just goes to show that balancing fiscal responsibility, thinking about, being fair to everyone, socially equitable, it's a tough job.
Yeah, no easy answers there. Raising the VAT, it could bring in a lot of revenue, but it could also discourage people from spending,
Hmm.
and that could make this potential slowdown even worse.
Yeah, yeah. The ministry's got a lot to consider for sure. Maybe, like we were saying before, maybe they could look at some more targeted measures, like exempting certain essential goods from the VAT increase.
Hmm.
That way, you're still bringing in more revenue, but you're also protecting those who are already struggling.
That's one way to go about it, for sure. It's all about thinking outside the box. Finding those solutions that hit multiple targets at once. At the end of the day, we want sustainable growth, the kind that benefits everyone in Indonesia.
That's the goal, absolutely. And that brings us to our final thought for today, something for everyone to ponder, maybe spark some new ideas. We've talked about all these global economic challenges, attracting foreign investment, supporting our industries here at home. But in this world that's, changing so fast, how can Indonesia really harness the power of technology? I mean, how can we use innovation to build an economy that's more inclusive, more sustainable?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's not just about, using technology to grow the economy. It's about making sure that growth benefits everyone. And the Ministry of Finance, they have a big role to play in making that happen.
Absolutely. They can foster that environment where tech startups can thrive,
Yeah.
invest in digital infrastructure, make sure everyone has those digital skills. All of that it'll shape the future of Indonesia, the digital future.
And that future, it could be amazing. Imagine an Indonesia where technology empowers all those SMEs we were talking about, where it helps connect those urban and rural communities and really drives that sustainable development we need.
That's a powerful vision. And the Ministry of Finance, with their expertise, with their commitment, well, they can help make that vision a reality.
Couldn't agree more. It's about embracing innovation, thinking strategically, and just having the courage to make those bold decisions. That's what's going to lead to a more prosperous, a more equitable Indonesia.
That's a great note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us today for this deep dive into the Indonesian economy. We hope this has given you all some food for thought, some insights and perspectives that will help you navigate all these challenges and also seize all those exciting opportunities that lie ahead.
Remember, everyone listening, the work you do at the Ministry of Finance, it matters. It has real impact on the lives of millions of Indonesians. You have the expertise, the dedication to make a real difference, to build a brighter future for everyone. So thank you.